going to set up a very basic Mantaflow explosion. So let's start with a new scene. Before we dive in, I want to talk about a bit of the nature of the simulation and how what kind of elements or items we need when we deal with an explosion in Blender. First you need the default cube, because that is going to be our domain where the simulation happens. It's imagine it as a volumetric container. I go to edit mode now and I will scale up this cube, because the simulation we are going to be is going to be bigger probably than the default cube size, and mind you, it's you always resize it in edit mode and not in object mode. So when you go back to object mode, make sure that the scale of your domain is at default at 1. Okay, and now okay, we have this, and we are going to use two panels here. The one is the physics properties for the domain, but we need an emitter for the simulation, and for I just add now a very basic sphere, and for that we use also the physics properties panel and the particle panel, okay, because we need to emit particles into this simulation. Okay, let's first convert this cube into a volumetric domain. As you see, we have this default setup here. I quickly increase the resolution because this is set to 32 for default, and that's the voxel size here. You see the size, it's pretty big, way too big. We need at least 96. It's much smaller. And the other thing I want to set up is the cache. It's very important and crucial. So let's select a cache folder. I make a new folder for this. Double click and accept. Okay, now we have the cache folder set up, and also I don't want the simulation to be that long, so I set it something like 125, or yeah, it's good. And the type now it's set at default. It is set to replay, which is an interactive simulation mode, but which is good for the beginning, for the time being, but later we are going to set it to all, because we are going to bake the entire simulation onto the disk. Okay, so now we have the domain set up with the basic default settings, and let's talk a bit about these settings furthermore. As we go down, I don't explain these things because these are not so important at this point, but adaptive domain is important, and I just make sure you check it. It speeds up considerably the simulation, so I always use adaptive domain, except when I'm not, but I will talk about it later. Okay, the other thing is the gas settings, the noise, and the fire. These you can leave as it is to 1, the maximum value is 5, but tampering, adjusting these may result in a higher, faster rising flame. Experiment with it, okay? Make sure the vorticity doesn't go above 0.225 because it becomes way too turbulent and ugly. So it's keep it as low as possible. I set it to 0.1. The noise is that's an upscale function, fluid noise. When we calculate the final bake, then you may apply some noise, but let's talk about it later. And there is the fire settings. This reaction speeds is for it defines how fast the fuel is burning. I like to keep it relatively low, like 0.25 for the beginning. Flame smoke is how much smoke is generated. Vorticity is the flames vorticity. I noticed that I want to keep it as low as well. And these are these temperature values. These are let's leave it as it is now, okay? Because I think this is good for it's a good start, and but it's still we don't see anything because we have to set up. We need some inflow, a source of for the simulation, because the domain is just a container, but we need something within the container inside which produces stuff. In this case, it emits into the container fuel and burns it, okay? So let's set it to flow, and as you see, Blender has already calculated it already created this smoke thingy there, but it's not really cool, or it's really like doesn't really do much. It's just a puff of smoke, and as you notice, it's a continuous inflow. No, actually it's not. It's continuous. If you set the flow behavior to inflow, then this sphere will emit into the domain continuously smoke, okay? It's actually not that bad. Looks pretty interesting. Let's set the flow type to fire and smoke, so we see some fire, and let's see what happens. Okay, that's a blast, alright. But it's not very interesting. It just going straight up, actually quite fast, and there is another option. So you have, so far you can set it to inflow, to geometry, and outflow. And if you set it to geometry, then it's just a one shot emission, because it emits smoke from the surface, then it fades away. So if flow behavior is geometry, it's a one, it's just a quick path. Inflow is a continuous, and if you have the inflow, you have the flow source. As you can either set it to mesh or particle system, but since we don't have particle system, we can set it to particle system, but then we have to generate particles from the sphere. So let's go to the particle tab and press the plus here, and let's set up that, because with particles you can make more interesting things. This important things here are important values, frame start and end. I start at 3 and 5, and so I emit particles into the domain from within the range of 3 and 5. And the lifetime I set to just like something like 3 frames, and maybe the randomness can be like on full, okay? And the other very important setting is the velocity, because now, as you see, if we emit these particles, they are emitted and then they disappear, but we want them to go outward and upward. So let's set the normal, like something like 7 maybe, and I also add a z axis velocity, like something like maybe 5. Okay, and I also randomize this because I don't want uniform velocity values. Okay, but and as if we check frame by frame, I also want to set the field weights. This is here you can set how much these particles are affected by gravity, for example, and I don't want these particles affected by gravity, so they shoot out straight outward like this. Okay, I think this is okay. So let's, while the sphere is selected, go to the physics properties panel, and at the flow source select the particle system. And now if you just press the arrow keys on the keyboard while the cursor is in the timeline area, and now we have this. I made the resolutions smaller because I want to play it back. It's a bit lame, right? Because you see we have these small flames and then they start rising slowly. It's not very great looking. So let's go back while the sphere is selected to the physics properties, and first set size. I set it to 8. I want to see big flames, okay? Like this. It's immediately much better look. And also, I wonder if we should, maybe I just leave it as it is, yeah. And because you can play with the initial velocity value, so if I set it to 2, let's see what happens. It adds an initial value for the smoke. It's pretty okay. And so the next thing we want to do is to make this even more interesting. So let's select the sphere and go to edit mode, and within edit mode I check polygons, okay, and let's duplicate this using Shift D, this sphere, scale it down, move it, Shift D one more time, add a few spheres, scale it down, Shift D, scale up a bit. We can put it here or maybe here. And if you hover the cursor over one sphere and press L, then it selects the entire map. Shift D, and I duplicate this small guy a few times. Alright. Now, so we have this thingy here, and let's see what happens if we start the simulation. One thing, okay, yeah, I think this is pretty okay. I want to adjust the resolution. I double up, okay, the resolution size, because the finer the resolution, the smaller the simulation is going to be, and more interesting. So as you see, if I stop it, press space, now it's just like 1, 2, 3, almost 4 cube on this axis. But if we reset this to 64, it gets a bit bigger, I guess. You see, at frame 28, it's almost like here. But if it's 128 and we start the simulation, it's I think this is smaller now, right? So calculate with that when you increase the resolution, that the shape of the explosion is going to change, okay, with the resolution. So it's a bit tricky sometimes to predict the outcome. But as you see, with the smaller, finer resolution, the simulation is already a lot more interesting than it was with the small resolution. And if you also add the noise to this, that's another refinement, a sort of post effect, and it's going to be even more interesting. But okay, let's now, that I think this shape is quite good, so let's make here another tab, the shader. We are using the shader editor, and while the domain is selected, yeah, let's rename this like explore mat, okay, and let's delete this principled shader, and I'm going to add a volume or principled volume, which is quite handy, to plug it here into volume. Okay, volume goes into volume, not into surface. And also on the render panel, or what is this, render settings properties, set this to cycles. Okay, we want to use, if you have GPU, select the GPU compute, and for the viewport, the max sample should be like 16. We don't want more, and add denoise. And okay, and we have to adjust two settings here. The word, I don't like this gray color here, so I always use some color, maybe a bit brighter, and select the light. And also this point light is pretty boring, so I set it to sun, because explosions usually happen outside, but this value is way too high. Set it to 20 and add a tint. Let's tint this. I added some warm color, and let's see how does it look like. Doesn't really look much. Let's adjust this. First, we can set the smoke color here, but it's not very dense, and it's totally featureless. I just hide the icosphere here, and I want to add a volume info node. This is pretty important because we can extract volumetric information from this node, namely density and flame. It's important. We use these two. I also want to add a black body. I don't know why is it called black body, but this, if you plug it into emission color, it's going to make a nice effect. Okay. And emission strength. For that we can use the flame, but it's not very great. And for density we add density, and but this is pretty boring, right? It's nothing really happens here because we have to tweak these and add more nodes. What I'm going to use, I usually add a color ramp for the density, and I also add a math node, and instead of add, set it to multiply. Okay, you see, it's immediately a lot better. If you play with these sliders, you can make it thicker or thinner, and also let's multiply this, duplicate this. Heck, but not like this. Sorry. Duplicate and plug it here. And we should calculate now this simulation because we only have a few frames. So let's go to physics properties panel, and I set this to all, and I bake all. Okay, I stopped the simulation now because I want to see and I'm impatient. And let's see how does it look like. Do we have we have the burning here, and the burning happens in a very like from something like 30 to 50 or even less. Yeah, in 10 frames. and so yeah, there are a few things we can do about this. First, the fire is burning way too fast, way too quickly. I don't want to fix that. We we need to emit into the simulation a lot more fuel. Like I want to add like fuel amount 8. Okay, initial temperature that this would be like 3. I just want to, and I want to increase the density as well. Okay, I want more dense. Sampling stop steps. Now, I forgot to talk about this. Since we are dealing with particles here, let's set this to maximum. This samples the particles in a denser rate. So it takes a sample 10 times within a frame. Okay, so it's going to enhance the simulation. Alright, so let's go back to the domain. I free up the simulation. I'm going to add noise. I switch off the video and I start baking, and see you in after the bake. Okay. Okay. No, the bake is done, and it's pretty okay. Let's adjust a few settings because I just want to see this thing better. As you see, our domain is way too small, so probably we need to recalculate this, but not in this video. And let's see how does it look like. If let's check a few frames. I like the shape of the smoke and the patterns here. The burning part is a bit. It should be brighter. I think we can adjust it with the flame multiply settings. Let's do that. Let's increase 128. Okay, now we have a better looking flame. It just takes time because the simulation is big. Okay, and let's check it here. So if you have followed the video and so far you can recreate this. Let's see it in a close-up. And let's go further. I like this. Okay, so I'm going to render this out because I want to show you how does it look like in a render. And now I stop the video, and I see you soon. Alright, okay, the bake is done. I just made a few adjustments. I go to this the word properties panel because I switched off the ray visibility for the camera, so we see the sky. This is pretty ugly color, so I want to change it to something like maybe this. And I also increase the strength for the emission strength. See, controlled by the flame output or attribute. So it used to be something like, I don't know, maybe 27. So you see it's quite dark. Obviously you can do this, or not obviously, but if we duplicate this, hell, not this way, sorry. If we duplicate this ramp, Shift D, and plug it here, and you increase this value to 128, you can tweak this. You see that there are quite a few options here. Or if you mute this but duplicate and plug it here, you see the effect is going to be different. So this is the tweaking part, right? Because now this is the the explosion, and in this phase it's quite young, but as we progress, let's see how the frame color changes with time, or the intensity. Maybe it's a bit too strong. Yeah. So yeah, careful. Okay, careful. But anyways, it's quite interesting. I like the shape of this explosion. There are nice, interesting things going on here. But as you may notice, the domain size is insufficient. So or you rather, you see it's not okay. Also, I adjusted the light color. You can play with it as you wish if you want to take it toward a warmer hue, and also the direction of the lighting affects the look. So because this is a sun, so imagine it like I show you how you have to imagine this. It's you rotate it around the Z. Sorry. Around like this, right? And with the X value you can adjust this angle. But this, I like to add a nice contrast to it, and also if you want these areas to be brighter, you either set the color, for example, or you play with the ambient, right? So if it's a daylight shot, then you probably want a brighter environment. Okay. What else? So let's go through one more time, because there are quite a few things I want to say. So if you want to recalculate this simulation, you have to resize this domain, and you do it in edit mode, right? Because otherwise, if you scale the object in object mode, it may result in you may have weird results. The other thing is the emitter. The possibilities there are quite endless. So you may add another object with particles. So if you want smaller explosions, like small arches or pieces, debris, that's a different story. I just save it quickly. But I think this is a good start, and I stop it now, and Thanks for watching. I hope you find it useful, and see you in the next video. Cheers and bye.